In our top story today, 3 Israelis have been wounded in a shooting attack at the Tekoa Junction in the Jerusalem area. The 35-year-old man was swiftly transported to Jerusalem's Shaare Tzedek hospital by the Magen David Adom ambulance service. Although his condition is serious, it has been reported as stable. The man's 2 daughters, aged 9 and 14, were also taken to the same hospital due to injuries caused by shrapnel. The victims have been identified as Elroi Kapach and his 2 daughters, Rachel and Avigail, who reside in the nearby Nokdim settlement. At the Shaare Tzedek hospital, the condition of Kapach improved, and in Bethlehem, an exchange of fire began in an attempt to stop the terrorist who was eventually caught in a Bethlehem mosque. Over the past year, there have been multiple instances of Palestinian gunmen targeting military installations, troops patrolling the Judean-Samaria security barrier, Israeli settlements, and civilians traveling on the roads. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was hospitalized overnight Saturday, reportedly suffering from dehydration after spending Friday in the sun at the Sea of Galilee with his wife Sarah. Netanyahu released a video statement hours after being hospitalized. Here are the details.
אתמול ביליתי עם רעייתי בכנרת, בשמש, בלי כובע, בלי מים, לא רעיון טוב. אז קודם כל אני רוצה להודות לכולכם על הדאגה, וגם להודות לצוותים המצוינים כאן בשיבה שבדקו אותי. ברוך השם אני מרגיש מאוד טוב, אבל יש לי רק בקשה אחת מכם. אנחנו עוברים גל חום במדינה, אז אני מבקש מכם, תהיו פחות בשמש, תשתו יותר מים, ושיהיה לכולנו שבוע טוב.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been hospitalized after a concerning incident at his home in Caesarea. The Prime Minister's office has confirmed that he was admitted to the emergency department at Sheba Medical Center on Saturday afternoon. Netanyahu spent the night in the hospital and underwent several tests this morning. According to sources from Sheba Medical Center, Netanyahu lost consciousness and fell, hitting his head while at home in Caesarea. However, he was conscious upon arrival at the hospital, and his condition was reported to be stable. Leaders from around the world have expressed their concern and sent well wishes to the Prime Minister. Opposition leader Yair Lapid wished him a speedy recovery, while U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy and former Vice President Mike Pence expressed their prayers for Netanyahu's health.
הצוות הרפואי החליט לבצע סדרת בדיקות מקיפות ושגרתיות שמתבצעות בהכרה מלאה, כולל בדיקה חשמלית של הלב. כולן יצאו תקינות לחלוטין. בשום שלב לא הבחנו הפרעה כלשהי בקצב הלב. לצורך המשך מעקב שגרתי החלטנו להשתמש באולטר תת-עורי, כפי שנהוג במצבים מסוג אלו, כדי לאפשר לצוות המקצועי הרפואי הצמוד של ראש הממשלה להמשיך במעקב שוטף.
This is not the first time Netanyahu has been hospitalized. In October 2022, he fainted during Yom Kippur prayers and was admitted to Shaare Tzedek Medical Center. Fortunately, all test results at that time came back normal and he was released. So we know the news is fast-paced, and we want to let you know that ILTV's new app is now available. So if you want to stay connected to the latest news from Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, download our new app now on all your devices. It's available in the App Store for both Android and iPhone. And joining us now to speak more about Prime Minister Netanyahu's hospitalization and release and its consequences is political analyst and editor of HistoryCentral.com, Mark Schulman. So, Mark, what more can you tell us about the circumstances surrounding Prime Minister Netanyahu's hospitalization?
Well, there's some question, and they immediately said it was because of a sunstroke, heat stroke, I should say. As someone who once had heat stroke when I was in the Army, you get it immediately, you don't get it a day later. So I think it's more than likely something else was at work. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but like I said, I had heat stroke, and I know you get it right when you're in the sun, and then you might collapse. But you don't collapse a day later. So obviously there's something else. It doesn't look like it's that serious. He was released from the hospital. But again, it threw everybody into a tizzy because Israel does not have really good laws when it comes to the question of what happens when a prime minister suddenly gets sick or, God forbid, something should happen to the prime minister. Israel does not have a vice president, for instance, like the United States does. In so many governments, there's been a deputy who's been designated as the replacement prime minister. That's how Ehud Olmert became prime minister when Ariel Sharon got his stroke and could no longer continue, and Ehud Olmert automatically became the prime minister. In Israel right now, it requires the prime minister to actually state that I cannot fulfill my job as prime minister at the moment, or it requires 3/4 of the cabinet to vote, and then 80 members of the Knesset need to vote in order to state that a prime minister is incapacitated. If he doesn't himself state that, and of course, if he's, let's say, unconscious or something, you would have to go through that procedure, and you would have quite a mess probably. So it's not really a good thing, the fact that Israel doesn't have a good system, or the Prime Minister Netanyahu since 2019 has not designated someone as his replacement.
Okay.
So that's really a bit of a problem.
We're definitely going to get into that. Now, Mark, Netanyahu got lots of support, both from Israel, even from Yair Lapid, Ehud Barak, and so on, and also from the world. On the other hand, some voices mentioned how odd it is that he was admitted to the Sheba Medical Center while it's not close to any of his houses. What's your take on that?
Listen, obviously everyone's going to support him when he's sick. I mean, look, as much as people are political rivals in this country, everyone also at one point or another were friends. I mean, you think about Ehud Barak and Netanyahu, who are bitter enemies at the moment. But on the other hand, they served together in the cabinet. Ehud Barak was his commander in the Sayeret Matkal. So they're, everyone is a friend in some which way and bitter political enemies in the other way. So it's not surprising that everyone sent, get well greetings and hope he's well. And no one wants anything bad to happen to Prime Minister Netanyahu in terms of his health. In terms of why he went to Sheba, well, Sheba is rated as the best hospital in Israel. So I guess if it's not an absolute emergency, I mean, if he was conscious and everything else, if you have the ability to get to what's considered the best hospital in Israel, I'm sure Ichalev and Hadassah might argue, but if you have the ability to get to the best place, I guess you'll go to the best place. So I wouldn't read too much into that, other than the fact that he was not in critical condition, because obviously if he'd been in critical condition, they would have gone someplace much closer.
True. Now, the cabinet meeting was postponed to tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, Netanyahu doesn't get the benefit of being off for too long. What are the consequences of that? And also, really, as we talked about it, what happens if he's incapacitated? I mean, what has to happen right now?
Okay, so first of all, the cabinet meeting being postponed does not mean a lot. However, keep in mind, part of the reason that he talked about it just being a question of his heat stroke or sunstroke is Netanyahu doesn't want to do anything to take away from, quote unquote, his power. And one of his powers is being strong and, a former member of the elite army unit and everything else like that. So anything would take away from that takes away just a little bit from his political power, I would think. And then the other question, again, because he has not designated somebody to be his immediate replacement. Look, Netanyahu generally seems in good health, but he's over 70. And the fact of the matter is things can happen. And I certainly saw that with Ariel Sharon. And the fact of the matter is with this very confusing government, let's put it that way, with many, many factions, the cabinet, if at some point it was decided that if he got sick again, and he was incapacitated, and either he stated the fact that he's incapacitated or let's say he was unconscious, God forbid, then the cabinet would have to make a vote that he's incapacitated. Like I said, the Knesset would have to vote 80 votes in favor. You could see opposition creating all sorts of problems possibly. And then on top of everything else, you'd have to decide who would be the next prime minister.
Definitely.
And within the Likud, it's not at all clear. There is no clear successor to Netanyahu. Successors to Netanyahu have all managed to leave the party, so it's not at all clear who would be the successor, and you'd have something fought out in the cabinet. We'd have a bit of chaos, I would think, for a period of time.
Definitely, but Mark, we're all human. We're wishing all the best to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
More speculation now over the Biden administration's attitude towards Israel after a report that Washington is, quote, reassessing its ties. Now, a Wall Street Journal editorial has said Washington treats Netanyahu's ruling government worse than they treat Iran's. And more from ILTV's William Sharon.
Why does U.S. President Joe Biden go out of his way to snub, criticize, and give marching orders to the government of Israel? This was the question posed rhetorically to the Biden administration in the opening line of a Wall Street Journal editorial over the weekend. The piece went on to say that U.S. President treats Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his ruling coalition worse than the ruling muhallis of Iran. The right-leaning newspaper critique comes after a report that Washington has been, quote, reassessing its ties with Israel. A report that comes off the back of the Biden's critical stance of Israel's far-right coalition, calling it the most extreme he's seen in his decades in politics, and the fact that Biden has so far not invited the Israeli leader for a traditional visit to the White House. The article also made mention to a recent Biden interview to CNN, which criticized Israel's handling of the protest movement against reforms, writing that Biden had no business meddling in domestic Israeli affairs. Tensions have been simmering since Netanyahu took power in December, members of his coalition also slamming the Biden administration in a form of public spat.
So we know the news is volatile and fast-paced, and we want to let you know that ILTV's new app is now available. So if you want to stay connected to the latest news from Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, download our app now on all your devices. It's available in the App Store for both Android and iPhone.